Try as I might, I just can't get a straight answer on what the movie is named. This sequence from it is about the Battle of Otumba, 1520, or Otompan, to use its native name. It is a bizarre mishmash of hits and misses, so let's get into it. The Aztec battle formation looks great from a distance. You can imagine the near despair of the conquistadors when they were suddenly confronted with this on the plain of Otompan, thinking, this time I am going to have my heart ripped out and sacrificed to pagan gods. They've made an earnest effort to look like Aztecs did look. The maquahuitl sword clubs, the round feathered shields, the cloaks, the loincloths, the padded cotton armour. There's a lot about this I like. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny though. For example, feathers on the shield faces were generally chest feathers, not these big bushy turkey feathers from Bargain Mania, and there's no reason why the maquahuitl should be wrapped in cords. They would have used pitch to hold the blades in. There are no zebras, or tigers if it's meant to be that, anywhere in the Western Hemisphere you see on that shield. Now, before anyone goes saying, that's an ocelot, dumbass, I know a lot about ocelots. Look, I've got lots and lots of ocelots. I know it isn't jaguar, because that is. They've gone a bit overboard with the war paint, I'm afraid. A small amount of red on the face, perhaps the jaw, is usually as far as they took it. But I love the spears. The obsidian edge spears look great, and so does the cloak on the man in the foreground. This looks great, although from a filmmaking point of view, I would suggest you don't allow light to be seen between their legs like that. Bring them down this side of the crest a little. It tends to downplay the sheer mass of them when you do that. The lack of any war suits, those overalls that they wore, sometimes in jaguar print, is a big minus. Should have had some of them, and in the front rank. Although, admittedly, large numbers of the knightly class would have been killed off in the recent fighting and the Tenochtitlan massacre, which had sparked the successful Aztec rebellion and week of savage street fighting. The weaponry you see here is quite sound. I'd say it's the best portrayal of Aztec weaponry ever in the cinema. And then look at this sad creature here. This is one of the cavalrymen. Look at that hair. Was he in Quiet Riot? Or in Footloose? How could your hair be that clean and non-greasy when the only shower you've had in weeks in the Mexican midsummer is the rain that fell during the botched evacuation from Tenochtitlan, the sad night? But then, what's this thing he's wearing? Is it meant to be the Aztec padded armor, as those crisscross lines worked through it suggest the quilting? Or is it meant to be the sort of doublet that many Spaniards did wear? Accounts of the conquest painted by the natives show a lot of Spaniards unarmoured, whether on horseback or on foot, and wearing an elegant doublet. If so, it's still a fail because of these flimsy laces here. They would have been slashed clean off long ago, because the Aztecs used mostly slashing weapons and would have caused this sort of effect. The front row are complete dorks. The next row are as bored as hell. These are not the conquistadors. This precious fat pansy has armour so god-awful it wouldn't be allowed in Braveheart. Some of those rivets are on the very edge of the leather strip. They're going to tear clean through. What were they trying to do here? I do know what they were trying to do. They're trying to do a xylophone. No, bugger it. Dog chews! And fair enough, Mexico is one country where you could profitably go around wrapped in dog chews, since all they've got is fucking chihuahuas. I'm sure they were trying to do a brigandine or jack, but fuck what a fail. On the other hand, a big tick to the fact that the man in the white shirt has switched to Aztec padded cotton armour. Big nuh-uh for not making it padded, and that hole that has torn right through it shows it is not 2 fingers thickness as the Spaniards attested. Here are some Aztecs wearing it, and strangely they remembered to make it look good when it was on them. The leather armour you're seeing here would not stop the point of a thrusting weapon, beloved of Hollywood as this slop is, and how come everyone's white shirts are so goddamn pristine? There are way too many hellbirds in the Holy Company in this movie, and way too many flags. Useless, you need every man wielding a sword now. Most of the men are shown bareheaded, which is ludicrously inaccurate. Here are some accurate modern portrayals of the Conquistadors, and notice how nobody feels it's a good idea to show them bareheaded. God, Mexico would be a punish if you were bareheaded for 2 years. The Spaniards take Holy Communion before going into battle. Accurate detail, thank you. Look at that Spanish artillery. Filmmakers love that heartless industrial war machine, visiting horror upon the Aboriginal peoples of the world. But the artillery was too wet to fire, on account of its being at the bottom of Lake Texcoco. You don't think they succeeded in dragging that through all those missing drawbridges under heavy Aztec attack, do you? Now one of the Tlaxcalan allies of the Spaniards steps forward and shoots an arrow towards the Aztecs, who are quite dismayed to see it land. This was a real tradition of that heroic little warrior nation who made the Spanish conquest, the Tlaxcalans. But the most important weapon of all is signally absent. That's the artlet, the spear thrower, the most exalted weapon the Mesoamericans knew, the one which, if they depicted heroes and gods holding a weapon, they chose to depict them with, the artlet. Yet, in an inexcusable bit of braveheartery, there is not one artlet in this entire battle sequence. And here I am, letting rip with this weapon fit for the gods in the Australian outback. It's a satisfying weapon indeed.
That's a guinea fowl. I could hit that from here. Let's give it a go.
This would be a great moment to point out before we move on that the Uber Jackoff, Eric von Däniken, actually had the gall to look at these Toltec Atlantean warrior statues holding Atlat and say that they were laser beam throwers from outer space. And somehow the Tlaxcalans always managed to recover the sacred battle arrow. Europeans, by contrast, gave up using these things about the time they ran out of mammoths and cave bears to hunt.
Look, we thought we were getting a battle scene. Now will you fucking show it?
Oops, sorry, no more of this build-up. And the non-existent can give it ass. Now hear this. Cannonballs did not explode. They were solid shot. Let's milk it a bit more, yeah. A waste of good acrobats. There were no exploding shells, I tell you. That's just the movies. No, this did not happen. No Aztec copped 2 bolts in him because the Spaniards took turns shooting to avoid wasteful doubling up on the same target. The make-believe cannons let rip. The musketeers let rip. And again, no, they took turns shooting. They were too thin on the ground to be used wastefully. You may be wondering, if the shots didn't explode, then what did cannons actually do to the enemy across a battlefield in 1520? Here's what. Would you believe it was a Mel Gibson movie that got it right? So, despite numerous stupid explosions, seriously, if you don't cope well with violence, pause now or skip now to 11 minutes 7 seconds. And now in slow motion. In a rare moment of accuracy, Mel Gibson's The Patriot shows what really did happen back then. And make no mistake, it devastated those whom it struck, and did nothing to those who were not squarely in its path. Now, having softened up the enemy with fictitious cannons, the Spaniards charge, both on foot and on horseback. Pause. Even that 13 seconds was a tissue of falsehoods. Exhausted foot soldiers running to keep up with the horsemen? No, they didn't. These men were at the end of their tether. The two arms acted as hammer and anvil that day. The Spaniards should have their lances couched and levelled, or thrust over arm, unstoppable while still moving. Then there's this bullshit. Taking on 4 men with your weapon pointed away from them is a prescription for getting your heart ripped out on a pagan altar. This is a depressingly common trope in the movies. There is nothing to be gained by putting yourself in the middle of a bunch of men who can hack you in the back and the sides unchallenged. Ever! One of the worst examples of this moronic trope was these mindless fuckwits vaulting over the shield wall presumably to their immediate death in Troy. And then there's these cretins guaranteeing that they will die by a sword thrust through their coarse human pincushion in the dust. Like most armies, the Aztecs and Spaniards carefully maintained a front line. No, Spanish swords were for thrusting, not for slashing. This is how they actually beat the Aztecs' superior swordsmanship, not guns, not cannons. The swordsmanship did it, really. How the hell is this musketeer still alive, running around unarmoured and shieldless in the middle of the Aztecs, with nothing but a gun that he's already fired? Likewise, how are these two fuckwits still alive? There's nothing stopping half the Aztec army from killing them in the back, unarmoured and shieldless. Honestly, keep out of an enemy formation. $15.20 is way too early for Morian helmets so decadent that they tear your tent clean open when you stagger off to the toilet in the middle of the night. Here are some more accurate modern portrayals, much more understated at this date. That was just an insult. Yeah, the sword's meant for thrusting, not slashing, but not only would that slash not have gone through, I doubt that it would even have been uncomfortable. That is very thick padded cotton. At last, a knight with levelled lance. Let's see it again. Another species of dumbass running into the Aztec formation with nothing but a crossbow, so when he shoots it, yeah, the guy he hits will stay hit, but he'll take 20 seconds to reload and just be done. accurate Aztec menswear, it was very revealing, which is why practically no reenactors will take on that subject matter. That is just not an efficient way to use a Spanish sword, and neither is that. Thank you for using an actual matchlock musket, that's great, but don't carry it around unarmoured and shieldless in the middle of an Aztec formation. You are going to your death. The sheer hail of missiles that emitted out of an Aztec army, darts, arrows, slingstones, these mostly helmetless, shieldless, mostly unarmoured men would have been exterminated long ago. No, the Aztec padded armour was a complete wraparound singlet or vest. It wasn't a flap at the front. Now, you may be wondering, how did the Aztecs come to be defeated in this fight? They don't seem to have any obvious disadvantages. How? And the answer is, the movie has completely omitted the trump card that Cortés pulled in order to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Pistols existed by this date, but were not used in the Aztec conquest. This part here looks good. I like it. So the Aztecs are routed, and we see a high-ranking officer of Spain's Tlaxcalan allies wearing the waterbird taxidermy on his backpack frame. It was the symbol of the city of Tizatlan, which became almost a universal symbol of Tlaxcalans during the conquest. And as these real-life supermen surveil the carnage of their somewhat piss-weak victory, the time has come to tell you what really happened in the Battle of Otumba. It is legitimate to show the Spaniards beginning the battle by charging at the Aztecs, not the reverse, because the survivor Bernal Diaz writes that that's just what they did. But I think he is being excessively literary in the passage about Otumba, and trying to compress 5 hours of savage battle into broad brushstrokes, and the divine inspiration is played up a bit. Other accounts give very different ideas of how the battle went. They have the Spaniards standing defensively in 2 lines back to back, receiving the Aztec charge. In those accounts, the Spaniards and Tlaxcalans were actually surrounded, and used their guns and crossbows to spoil Aztec groups thrusting towards them. Must have shot the officers then, what with only 19 guns and crossbows in the whole army. And so long as they took turns shooting, this worked, because the Indian officers wore gaudy back banners visible from orbit. In a hermetically sealed world where missile weapons had so little stopping power that the reader of the source material, the witness accounts, truly starts to question whether the Spaniards were made of mere flesh and blood at all, or actual iron. Honourable mention must go to the Spanish dogs, deerhounds and mastiffs, which covered themselves in glory, attacking the Indians again and again. But the next time you see one of these in a movie or even a documentary, I guarantee will be the first. The pathetic rump of the Spanish cavalry, only about 20 men on entirely wounded horses, tirelessly attacked in spoiling attacks on the Aztecs again and again over 5 hours, until eventually Cortés spotted the enemy commander-in-chief, by that gaudy back banner of course, and attacked him with just 6 men, including himself, in one of those rare occasions in history when the opposing commanders actually meet in single combat, like they do all too often in cheesy movies like, damn it, I've got to mention The Patriot again, like in The Patriot. And if you can't guess, the winner was Cortés. A general rout of the Aztecs set in,
and the Spaniards got a second wind, and so did the Tlaxcalans, and chased them down like wild dogs. It should be noted, by the way, that the enemy were mostly not actually Aztecs from the city in the lake. They were the subject peoples of the northeast from the lake complex, mostly. In any case, they gave up the pursuit, and the surviving Spaniards, only about 400 men, made it back to Tlaxcala with the remnant of the several thousand Tlaxcalan allies who had set out with them, and plotted the conquest of Mexico, which they achieved in little more than a year. Because never was there a greater badass striding the earth than Cortez. And if there is anything close to a worthwhile visual experience of this, try the BBC, yes, the BBC of all people, Heroes and Villains documentary series. One of them is about Cortez, and although it is decidedly unspectacular, that's because it is carefully avoiding making mistakes. Try it, folks, and thank you for paying attention right through to the end of this. You do me much honor.